Hey everyone, I am Rebecca and welcome to the Creating Warrior YouTube channel where I just love to create all things art. So in today's video, I sewed a dress. Woohoo! This is the first dress I've ever sewn before and it was inspired by the Essentials Club. When I first started getting into sewing, I looked up a lot of her blog posts and YouTube videos. So first I went to Joann's to look for fabric. I first stumbled upon this cotton, but it was way too see-through and it felt very rough. And so then I went to the shirting aisle, and shirting fabric apparently is self-explanatory for shirts. So I saw 3 different fabrics that caught my eye. One of them was really similar to the one that she used. Another one was this very bright yellow gingham, and then the next one was the one I eventually got, which was this more neutral orangey toned gingham, actually called mustard yellow, I believe. Okay, here I have a wrinkled receipt out. So originally it was $12.99 per yard, but it was discounted to $9.85 per yard. I ordered about 2.5 yards. I knew that I wanted my dress to be longer, so I went for 2.5, but 2.5 ended up actually being not enough. I also bought elastic, which you'll see. This is for the sleeves of the dress. Then I bought this fabric chalk, which would have made my life way easier in past sewing projects. And then I bought this seam ripper. Seam ripper was definitely helpful, especially for the end when we make a hole that the strap can go through. Next I bought thread. It was more of like a yellow neutral tone that matched the dress, I felt like. So let's get into talking about the actual dress. So first I started out self-drafting. A lot of times when people start sewing, they buy patterns online, but this tutorial was more like an at-home self-drafting process, so in that way it could fit your needs and your body shape. I got a shirt that was really well fitted for me. It was from my friend Anna Marie. So I laid it out. I gave myself about 2 inches of seam allowance. So then I used a fabric chalk and I measured about 2 inches away from the outline. I also measured the length of my dress. So I measured from the top of my shoulder to the bottom of where I wanted to stop. And I wanted this to be a bit more modest. I wanted mine to be about the knee length, past your fingertips. That ended up being about 35 inches in length for me, so then I measured that out. I also had to fold over one of the sides so that I could create a dip because of the v-neck style. So then once you have the template, you can use it exactly the same for the other side. So what I just cut out was only half of the front of the dress, and then now we're flipping over and we're cutting out the other side of the dress. I made it a bit angled, which is why you can see it's folded over. It gives more of a wrap effect, which she did in the video. And she was like, you can do it if you want, and I wanted to do it, and it turned out very cute. For the top, you have 2 pieces, and the back you have 1 piece cut out. So then I cut it out, and I forgot to film me cutting out the back piece. Now that all the pieces were cut out, it was time to sew. Essentially, we had 3 panels by now, so I was taking turns with the top 2 panels sewing it to the back. With the good sides of the fabric facing each other, I sewed together the top hem of the shoulders and the sides. First, I did it with the right top fabric panel, and then I did it with the top left panel. As I fall behind, I'm so sorry for dreaming about the future. Good morning. Yesterday I drafted out this dress as you saw, and then I actually sewed and cut out the back piece as well. I need to kind of trim this neckline and then the shoulders. Take apart all the good things. And you can see that I started hemming the neckline, the back neckline, and since it connects from the back neckline all the way to the front V-neck part. Later I went back and I actually did a double hem. It was starting to look a little better, but it was still kind of like apron-like. So it was like, I don't know if it was gonna turn out okay. The puff sleeves, I think what was really brought the dress together. I really wanted originally to do puff sleeves like in the original, where it went past the elbow around here. Because it's spring, it's not like warm enough yet, I feel like, to wear short sleeves, but unfortunately I ran out of fabric. And when I ran out of fabric, I went back to the store, but I realized that I had bought the last fabric on the roll. The 2.5 yards of fabric was exactly what was left, and it wasn't in the stores no longer. I couldn't really find it online, so I had to improvise. I was really bummed out, but I had to kind of make it work. And I realized that with the one length of fabric that I was originally going to use for one of the sleeves, I had to divide it into two. So the square that I cut out turned out into like two smaller rectangles. I was worried that it would be too puffed up or it would be too short, but it ended up being very cute. Next time I'm going to definitely try to order even more fabric than I need and make sure that that fabric is in stock. I sewed all across the angle, the rounded bit of the sleeves. Usually when you sew, when you start, you do a front stitch and then you do a back stitch so that it kind of creates a lock and it doesn't like fall apart. But when you do puff sleeves, you want to create a gathered effect, so you just keep on sewing, you don't do a back stitch. Once I did just a full-on sew, I started to gather it. I had to find out like which thread would help gather it, like one side would be better than the other, so then I grabbed it and then I'll start pulling and tugging, and it took some time, but eventually it became more of a gathered look. That was really fun. And then after I created the gathered effect, I was able to align it with the actual bodice of the dress and start sewing all around. What I realized is that when you have that fabric, it kind of circles around. You want the top of that fabric to be equal, and you want it to match the top so that when you hem it later, the bottom kind of hides. The sleeves are definitely tricky. It was my first time sewing sleeves ever, and then I decided to do puff sleeves. Yeah, it was a bit tricky. I had trouble finding out how to sew it at the bottom, and then putting in the elastic was definitely also a bit annoying. I still had to sew the bottom because it was still open even though it was gathered. And here you can see me showing off like the sleeves attached. It doesn't really look puffed yet because even though it's gathered, it doesn't have the elastic. I folded over the amount of elastic with some allotted space, and then I sewed, leaving about 3 inches or 2 inches so I could insert the elastic and bring it all around. But usually when people do this, they have some sort of clip. So first I used a bobby pin, but it only worked on one of the sleeves. It kept getting in the middle, lost in the sleeves, which is so annoying. So then I had to improvise and then use a paper clip hole. You like poke a hole and then you like thread it in so that this head would get in. The problem with a bobby pin is that it wouldn't be straight aligned like this, and so then it would like twist around and everything. So a paper clip also worked really well with this type of elastic. And so then once it was gathered around, I sewed it together over like this, and then it would pop back into the sleeve, and then I would sew back that line, and there I had puff sleeves. Next, I created the 2 tie waist straps. So then I measured the circumference of my waist, which is about 30 centimeters, and then I added 10 inches. Oh my gosh, I keep saying centimeters. So then I measured the circumference of my waist, which was about 30 inches, and then I added 10 inches onto that, so that was 40 inches. So then I cut out 40 inches by 3 inches. And once you cut out that rectangle, you're going to cut it again in half for your 2 waist straps. So in the end, it's actually 40 inches by 1.5 inches. I tried 4 by 2 inches. 1 inch per strap ended up being way too small for me to be able to turn it inside out. So these straps, it was the first time I made straps. You would think it's easy, but it was actually the hardest thing I did out of this whole, like out of all of the, it was the most frustrating thing because I didn't understand how to like turn it inside out. There you go. You have witnessed my first fail. I'm reading YouTube comments and they're all saying like, I spent the last hour trying to figure it. So I know how to do it now. This is how I learned from mistakes. So we can cut out another one and then it'll be fine. It'll be fine. It finally worked. Oh my. I found out that another way to do it is to cut like a little hole in the end of the fabric and then insert a bobby pin, and then that way it kind of inserts like this and it comes out inside out. Lastly, I attached the tie straps to the fronts, one in the front and one going through the back of the hole, and then I actually made the hole by marking where the dress aligned with the fabric chalk. Then I went in with the seam ripper, unpicked the hole, and then I sewed back the places near the hole so that it wouldn't fall apart. And then I had a full-on ready dress. I showed my dad and he was like so shocked, and I showed my sister, and I think it's just a really beautiful dress for spring and summer. It's exactly how I wanted and imagined it to be. I love doing each project because every time I sew or do any art or editing a video, I feel like I learned something new. It was exhausting, but I'm excited to show you the final product. 3, 2, 1. Oh my goodness!
Summer rain on the window. Watch the time